Do you remember the first time that you participated in a demonstration?
Yes, I remember the first time. It was a very frightening experience for me. I can remember the policemen. I can remember the paddy wagons.
What do you remember about the policemen?
They were very intimidating. They had the billy clubs or nightsticks or whatever they're called now, and they had no compassion. I think in the whole time I was a part of that movement, I only met one policeman that seemed to have had any kind of compassion.
How is he different? How do you mean?
That was during the D-Day demonstrations where one group would go to jail and they'd put them in jail, and then another group would start out, to the point where they didn't have places to put us. They had us all out at the fairgrounds and everywhere else. One policeman stopped me and asked me, he said, well, when is this going to end? I said, well, do we have our freedom yet? He says, well, I noticed that you guys seem to have all the determination in the world. He said, and tell you the truth, I'm tired. He says, I've worn out 2 pair of shoes. He says, I wish you could have your freedom just to stop this. And he was very sincere about it.
That's very interesting. Usually when I'm talking with people, they don't get the personal side of the police. It's simply usually a collective image
I see.
of the
I
police.
see. I can remember that one. The only one I remember. I don't remember his name, but I do remember that one, because normally they wouldn't even stop to talk to you, but this one did.
What kind of impact did that have on you?
Well, it made me know that everybody didn't feel the way the total police force did. And that means something. If you can convert one or get one, maybe he can do some other converting, you know.
Right. Were you ever attacked, physically attacked, hit, beaten?
The only time I can remember was I think we were in Danville, Virginia. I was not the one being beaten. There was a young man with me, and I can't remember his name now, but we had been taken to the police force. And I guess the only reason I was not beaten is maybe because I was female, I don't know. But we were trapped in the elevator, and the policeman used his billy club to beat this young man while we were trapped in the elevator. And then he simply put it back into the holder and walked away like nothing had happened.
How many were on the elevator?
It was just the 3 of us. Just the 3 of us. This same young man, and his name still escapes me right now, but that night, I think there were 2 or 3 policemen, broke glass up and down the railroad track, made him take his shoes off and run on the broken glass.
Turbulent times.
Yes, we were called rabble rousers. In any city we went into, we were bound to be harassed at any given time.
Well, looking at Birmingham, you were arrested once in Birmingham?
Yes.
What were the circumstances of your arrest?
That was the famous Sunday, Easter. I think it was around Easter. That was the time when Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail came out. There were so many of us. There were a lot of older women who also went to jail with us. It was not a pretty picture. We had cots, metal cots to sleep on. That bothered me. Like I say, I'm a people person.
Yeah. Where were you housed?
In the Birmingham jail.
At the jail,
okay. Dr. King and those were someplace else. Bernard Lee, all these guys were there. All these older women, like I was saying, were in jail with me. We had metal cots to sleep on. No mattress, just the metal cots. So our thing was, this is wrong. These people need better accommodations. You know, there was one toilet sitting over in the corner, so we had to shield each other whenever you had to use the restroom. We used our coats or whatever. But the sleeping conditions is what bothered me more than anything else, that these older women had to lie on metal cots. So what we did was we used our coats, those of us who had our coats there, to pad the metal cots. And we bugged the wardens and whoever else we could get their attention to bring Kotex, all right? Okay. I mean, they didn't know the difference. We needed what we needed them for, so we just pad the beds with all these Kotex napkins for these older women to sleep on.
And how long did you remain there?
We were there 4 days.
4 days.
4 days.
And what sticks out in your mind most is the other cots.
Exactly.
What about
Exactly.
the personal treatment?
The food was horrible. I do remember that. We had some brown-looking grits that were very, very runny. What I now know are powdered eggs. Very, very hard biscuits. And that was about the extent of it. Nobody ever came up to really check on us. We were just there, except when we'd bang on the bars in order to get their attention to get those supplies that I was just telling you about. That was the only contact we really had.
What was the reaction of your parents about your involvement?
My stepfather never said that much about it. My mother was horrified. Horrified is probably not the best term. She was afraid. She was afraid.
For your safety?
Yes, exactly. And she'd cry and she'd say, well, Bunny, I know you got to do what you got to do. She says, but don't expect me to sit up all night waiting on you.
And she probably did.
And that night when I got out of jail, she was sitting there waiting on me.
Right.
Yes.
What were the circumstances of your being released?
We all had to go to court.
Okay.
And we were fingerprinted, our pictures were taken. So if they still have those records, I guess I have a little record downtown. But we all had to go to court. Yes, yes. And if I remember correctly, I can't remember that judge's name, but that day we were in court and that judge had a heart attack.
And died.
He died. He certainly did.
Mm-hmm. And then you guys were put back in jail?
For a time.
And
until,
then brought back?
Yes.
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 I believe Mrs. Hendricks' daughter
Faye.
told me about that as
Yes.
well. Were there any of the people, did you know most of the people that were in jail with you at the time?
I didn't know any of them.
You didn't know any of
No,
them?
no.
That's interesting.
Didn't know any of them.
I've interviewed a number of people, and one person in particular suggested to me that she went to jail and she wanted to go to jail, but once she got there, it was just terrible. And she had vowed that she would never go to jail again because of the experience that she had. How did it impact upon you? Did you have the idea that you never wanted to go back to jail, you would not demonstrate again because of that possibility of going back?
No, interestingly enough, every demonstration they had, I was right there. It's just that that's the only time I was arrested. Mm-hmm. But I was willing to go back, whatever it took. Mm-hmm. Whatever it took, I was willing to do that.
So between April 1st and probably May 11th or May 12th, there were demonstrations practically every day, consistently, and you were involved in many of those.
Yes.
But you were also very closely associated with Andrew Young and even Dr. King and others. Tell me about the relationships that evolved or developed as a result of your being so active.
I guess I did become very close to the administrative staff because when I left Birmingham, I went to Atlanta, to where the national headquarters is, and that's where I became very good friends with Dorothy Cotton, Dr. King, who could never remember my name. He always called me Liz Taylor because he couldn't remember Hayes for some reason. I traveled a lot with Andrew Young and James Bevel, going from one point to the other.
What was the circumstances of your travel?
To do mass meetings. There were 3 other fellows that I used to work very closely with in the movement. We all became friends, and we were called SCLC's Crackpot Voter Registration Team. And sometimes these guys and I would travel together, or I'd travel with Andrew Young and Jim Bevel to the various spots wherever we were going to have mass meetings. Selma, we've gone as far as Texas. Now, I didn't go there with Andy and Bevel. I went there with the other 3 guys, the crackpot team, as they called us, just to do voter registration.
How did that process really begin? We know that you were involved here in Birmingham in '63. You were a freshman in college at the time. What was the link?
Dr. King used to have what he called retreats. Some of them were held in Atlanta, various places. I can remember having one in Frogmore, South Carolina. But at these retreats, it was his effort to regroup, so to speak, make sure that he kept his movement nonviolent or whatever. He even required us to have reading materials. In other words, material that would motivate us to stay focused or whatever. And it was at one of the retreats that I decided to go full force, and that's where I met C.T. Vivian and Wyatt Walker and all these other guys, Dorothy Cotton. I think that was when I really got to meet Dr. King, and to a point where I could talk to him and really get to know him better.
Were you actually on the staff?
Yes, our crackpot team was a part of the staff.
You joined the staff.
Yes.
And what did your parents say about that involvement, to leave Birmingham, to leave school and get involved in the movement at that level?
My mother did not want that. It was a struggle for her to even have me in school. As a matter of fact, somewhere down the line, I'll probably tell you that it bothered me that she had to borrow money for me to go to school. So I decided that school is important, but this was more important to me. And I had to sit down and express to her my feelings about what I was doing. And the fact that I thought what we were doing could make a difference, not just for me, but for the entire black race, which was my ultimate aim. I didn't know where this thing was going to go. I didn't know if some of us would be killed, but I knew in my heart that I had to stay with it for as long as I could. So in the end, she gave in. She worried a lot. I had to constantly write. She expected a letter at least twice a week.